Today is the first session in a two-part series that the center is doing with JPMorgan. So the series is called The First Job and Beyond, Stepping Stones to Financial Wellness. And this session specifically today is going to focus on the actual job offer and negotiations around that, and thinking about your benefits as you join and get your first job. So again, my name is Robin Doyle. I am on the board of the Center for Women in Business at Rutgers. And also I'm an ex-JPMorgan employee. I worked at JPMorgan for 28 years before retiring last July. And so it's really exciting to be bringing this session to everyone today with my colleagues from JP. So let me introduce these two wonderful speakers we have today. We have Shaneqa Harper and Stephanie Wheeler joining us today. So Shaneqa works out of JPMorgan's Columbus office. She joined the firm in 2017, and she is a senior associate in the recruiting area of JPMorgan, focused specifically on diversity, equity, and inclusion. In 2018, she joined the corporate recruiting area, focusing on human resources and corporate responsibility. Stephanie works out of JP's Tampa office, and you can see it's a beautiful day for her down in Florida. Stephanie is an associate in the global employee support area, focused on health and wellness. She joined the firm in 2018, and in 2019, she became the team lead and an associate managing the health and wellness team. So thank you both again for joining us today. We're really excited to be able to bring your expertise to the population students that are joining the call today. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend about 45 minutes or so doing some Q&A with the two of you. And please, anyone who's interested in putting a question in the chat as we're going through it, put it in and we'll try and ask questions real time as much as possible. And then of course, we'll leave a little time at the end if anyone has any additional questions when we get to that point. So I think without further ado, we're ready to begin. Stephanie, Shaneqa, are you ready?
Absolutely.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so we're going to start with the first question for Shaneqa, and that is going to relate to the job offer. So help people to understand, what are the key components of a job offer that they should be aware of and should be thinking about as they're out there and they're starting to get these offers.
Absolutely. So don't overthink it, right? What are things that you're going to want to know as you're starting a new role, right? So start date, right? Your location, what building are you going to be working out of so you can try to map out your commute? These are kind of those top things that you really want to think about. You also want to think about your salary that should be located somewhere within that job offer as well, depending on if you get any type of sign-on bonus, if you have buyout, things like that, those things should be listed as well. So just making sure that those major components are being added into your job offer. Our job offers here at JPMorgan Chase are pretty detailed. We talk about any clawbacks, any legal verbiage that you really need to pay attention to will be in that job offer. It's about 2 to 3 pages long, so it really does make sure it goes in depth. It has a very brief blurb around when are you eligible for your benefits, things like that. The topics that Stephanie's going to touch on is going to have a very brief element in there about that. Some job offers, depending on where you're located, will also have location-specific verbiage that needs to be included as well. So just take your time and read through that and make sure all of your questions are being answered. And if not, go back to your recruiter, hiring manager, whoever you've been working with throughout the process to get those questions answered.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, really. It's not just simply the job, the dollars, right?
Absolutely, because this is a contract, right? Like this is a binding contract that you are signing. You're going into basically business to give your expertise to this company, right? So you want to make sure that this contract is inclusive of everything that you would like to see. And keep in mind, these are our offer letters, and I have to speak from the vantage point of JPMorgan Chase, are pretty standardized, right? So a lot of that verbiage has been vetted over and over again by legal, risk, and control. So these are pretty much templates, and we make sure that the pertinent information is included. But if you're going to a smaller organization that may need to write these offers out, like line for line, definitely take your time and read through that and make sure everything is included.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously one of the key components to a job offer is what your compensation is going to be, salary plus whatever else you consider to be compensation. Talk to us a little bit about how you decide what you're worth, what is your value when you're looking for jobs and when you're receiving offers. How do you know it's right for you?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, because as a recruiter, I can tell you that I've been doing this for a long time, and as soon we can have a beautiful conversation throughout the interview process, and as soon as I ask a compensation question, that's when the squirming happens. That's when the seesaw and the back and forth. Well, what do you guys offer? And that's not my question, right? My question is, what are your compensation expectations? And only you can tell me that, right? It would not be fair for me to say, well, this is what we offer, and give you your comp expectations. So when you're coming out into the job market in general, my advice to you is to kind of take a step back. Think about the lifestyle that you want to maintain, right? Again, JPMorgan Chase can't tell you that, right? Are you looking to buy a home in the next year or so? These are things that you want to think about as you're thinking about, as Robin, as you put it, your worth, right? Also think about your degrees. What are you bringing to the table? But also talking to your recruiter. I'm going to say recruiter in this instance, because I will be the person that's having those comp conversations. Talking to your recruiter to make sure you understand the grade level of the role or the seniority of the role that you're going into, to make sure what you're asking for is in line with that role, right? So let me give you an example. If I'm applying to an analyst role here at JPMorgan Chase, but I'm asking for a salary that more so aligns to a managing director, which is the highest level you can get to before OC member, that would not make sense, right? So coming into an analyst role, irrespective of the work that you lay out on the table, it just does not align to that seniority of the role. So make sure as you're doing that planning for your comp expectations, that you also have a healthy understanding going into the role that you're pursuing, to understand the seniority of the role and if what you're asking for is reasonable for that level of seniority. And then by all means, there's tons of market research out there. Definitely do your research, but at the end of the day, every organization is different. Every organization has their own standard practice of how they look at compensation. So does JPMorgan Chase. We have a specific philosophy on how we look at base, bonus, the seniority of the role. Whether a certain bonus will have a cash stock split. There's so many different variables that go into that. It's really a back and forth conversation, but you should come to the table with some level of a number in mind.
So that's hard to do sometimes, isn't it? To find out what those dollars are.
Yeah.
You mentioned like websites. Are there other means to get information? If you
Sure.
know somebody at JP, is it right to ask them what they know about the compensation structure? How else can people, like, I understand what you're saying about what's the standard of living I would like, but also you sort of have to marry that with the jobs that you're applying for, right?
Absolutely. So that's why I say it should be a back and forth conversation. So I would give you an example. If I ask a candidate for their compensation expectations, a beautiful answer to that question would be, well, as I'm coming out into the market, I'm really feeling comfortable somewhere in the ballpark of 110 to 120, right? Rather that you can have your reasons, whether that's an uptick from what you're making currently, or whether this is your first role and this is what you've done research to find out. And then you can kind of say, but I do have a level of flexibility and would love to learn more about how that fits into the value of this particular seat for this role in comparison to the seniority of the role. So you hear how that sounds. And it's a back and forth conversation rather than saying 110, 120, no flexibility. Give me what I want. You open the door for a conversation, and that is what you want. Because I think the apprehension or the angst that a lot of people feel is they're like, I don't want to ruin my opportunity for this role by saying this magic number that no one agrees with. Don't worry about that if you can make it a conversation rather than you feeling like you're negotiating an offer as soon as you start conversations. Because when candidates are speaking with me, it's typically the first conversation that they're having. So this is not negotiation time. This is more so learning time, and say, Shaneqa, learn something about me. This is my expectation. Now tell me how that makes sense for JPMorgan Chase. And we can then have this fluid conversation. So if I tell you, sorry, that comp expectation is way outside of the marker for this role, I'm not eliminating you, but I'm being very transparent to say, hey, consider this as you continue to move forward. Because my practice as a recruiter, I don't want anyone to feel like they've invested their time in the interview process and then get to the end of the process to be surprised with this huge delta.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, right? At what stage do you actually, I think more people think that the actual dollar amount comes at the very end of a long process, which I think in my experience, that has always been very common. But what you're suggesting is know a little bit more upfront, because you may not want to go through the process if it's not going to get you to where you want to be. And if, you know, the salary range for the particular position isn't what you need, then perhaps you just stop at that point and go pursue a different position.
Yeah, and understand that you're talking a human being talking to another human being, right? And all these companies are structured differently. So definitely fill out the conversation and fill out when it feels appropriate. If you're talking to the receptionist who's scheduling you, that may not be the best time to say, hey, what here's my comp expectations. Like, read the room, understand who you're talking to. Is this person really going to have a level of knowledge to be able to have that conversation with you, right? And again, a lot of what I'm giving is advice based on my best practices as a recruiter here at JPMorgan Chase, but I also want to be broad enough to give you advice on if you are speaking to someone where you're going to speak to 3 people before you get to a me, right? So definitely read the room, understand who you're going to be talking to, and you may even be able to ask the receptionist to say, hey, who will I be speaking with next? So you can make sure you have your lines of questioning in line.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. And these days you can easily find out about people by going to LinkedIn and understand where they are in the organization, what their backgrounds are, and so on. And that can be really helpful in knowing somebody when you're preparing for the interview and all that. But this is really focused more on like we're getting an offer and what are the things that we can negotiate. So let's talk a little bit about you know, flexibility and other things that might be part of a job, or an important part of a job offer for folks these days. What are the other things that people can negotiate?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Sorry. So the question is, in addition to dollars, right?
Okay.
What are some of the other components of the job offer? Can you negotiate, right? For example, you mentioned location, but so if the location happens to be far, like a long commute these days, can you negotiate for flexibility and things like that? So what else can you negotiate for?
That is an inundated question because offers are creative, right? Like and it depends on the organization. Some things are set in stone. So I tell candidates up front, like, I can't negotiate benefits. Benefits are benefits. Like Stephanie will probably tell you, like, you're not going to be the only person in the firm that has this unique health package. You know, like we have set health package criterias, and you pick one and that's what you kind of go with. But there are some levels of negotiation in terms of if there is flexibility in the location, right? To say, hey, especially given our current environment, some organizations are more open to a hybrid model to have 3 days in, 2 days work from home, depending on what your situation is. Again, while I want to speak more broadly, some organizations have a lot more flexibility than maybe a larger organization who has to have very stringent structures to say, we're trying to manage 1 million people here, so we have to have structure. Some organizations are smaller where they're like, listen, as long as you're doing your work, like, work from home, you know, so that might be a point of consideration. Also, depending on if you have, if you're leaving behind bonuses at your current employer, and this is for individuals who are leaving an employer that has a structure that has bonuses, stocks, things like that, you can certainly negotiate that to say, hey, is there any way to get a buyout for these these unvested stocks that I'm leaving on the table? Those are variables to think about. Also, your start date. If you please be upfront about that, making sure that any vacation you have scheduled, understanding from your recruiter or the hiring manager, will this be unpaid, paid time if I need to take it immediately? Or maybe I need to push my start date to really accommodate time that I've already requested off with my current employer, or I'm graduating and I kind of want to take a little bit of a buffer before I just jump into a role. Those are also things to consider, because to me, time is more valuable than money. So if you can negotiate around time, that's certainly the time to do that at the point of offer.
Yeah, for sure. Time is really important, and you realize that, more and more as time passes. So,
Mhm.
what is the right timing for that conversation? Again, you mentioned already, you don't ask the receptionist how much does this job pay,
Yeah.
but how long into the process do you wait before you start to say, I'll need some flexibility in my job because I have whatever situation, or maybe you don't even have to say why, but
Mhm.
when do you start to like discuss those things in the process?
Right. So I would say anytime that you're talking to a decision maker, right? So at the time that you're talking to a decision maker, again, read the room, make sure that during a conversation where you are really highlighting your knowledge, skills, and ability, that the whole conversation doesn't become around compensation, right? Because at the end of the day, this decision maker is still trying to make a decision, not based on your comp expectations, but based on, can you do the job? So a recruiter, beautiful place to start that
Right.
conversation. They sit in HR. They should be able to give you some high level line of sight to things like compensation, location, um, when is the hiring manager looking to start this role from a timing perspective? Those types of questions, if you are interfacing with the recruiter versus talking directly with the hiring manager, then definitely pose those questions to the recruiter. However, there are several organizations where there is no recruiter. The hiring manager is
Mm,
the recruiter, right? So certainly at the point that you're talking to the hiring manager, I would say either that first or that second conversation. Again, there's no magic number of conversations to then say, okay, this is my time to start to talk about comp. If you feel in that first conversation, this is the time for me to introduce myself and really massage this conversation around my knowledge, skills, and ability. And you walk away having that in hand, and you move on to the next stage within the process. Maybe say, okay, I accomplished that goal of learning about the role. Now I want to ask some additional questions around salary and comp. However,
mhm.
again, go with the flow of the conversation. And the perfect place, if anyone in the process asks you, do you have any questions for me? There's no right or wrong answer. They've opened up the door for you to ask that question. So ask the questions that you have. And even if they're not the right person, they can say, well, maybe in the next stage, or maybe there might be someone else that I can point you in a direction of, right? That is always a beautiful place to ask those questions, because there's no right or wrong answer in that case, because they've opened the door for any questions that you had.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful. And I think, the recruiter is the person to have those kind of dialogues with
Mhm.
if you have the opportunity. So we actually have a question that just came in,
Sure.
Shaneqa, and so this person has about 10 years of work experience and is now
Mhm.
graduating. And the question is, with that work experience, do you have an opportunity to actually negotiate for higher salary than someone might get at an entry level if they have no experience? How do
If they
you
have
like,
no experience.
yeah,
Absolutely. So that'll go back to the job description. What is this job asking for? Is that
right.
10 years of experience? Is it mandatory? Is this a role that you're applying to that says you need to have 2 to 4 years of experience, right? So definitely bring that to the table. And if you're already in conversations, that means that they like what they see on your resume. And if you've included that degree that you're graduating with, you've included those 10 years of experience, something about that is palatable for that employer.
Mhm.
So certainly bring that up. That brings me back to the initial point to say, hey, I saw in the job description that this role requires 2 to 4 years of experience. First red flag that might be a junior role in comparison to 10 years, someone coming in with 10 years of experience, and have that conversation to say, hey, is this role comparable for someone that's coming in with the amount of seniority that I am, 10 years of experience? And again, that goes back to, are there different levels? Should I be applying to something that's more of a VP? right?
Mhm.
In order to get myself within that salary range that I'm looking for. Because again, there's no amount of experience in some situations that are going to push something to 100K that is so juniorized that it only garners a value of seat of 40, 50, maybe 70K, right? So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it's this value, right? It's what you said, like,
Mhm.
I value myself at this level because I have 10 years of experience and I have now a degree. So understanding, your value and what you think you should command for that, then you have to match that to the right position. So it makes a
Abs-
lot of sense. A lot of self-awareness going on there.
Absolutely.
Um, so this is an interesting question. Another one just came in, and I've actually had this question in other webinars that I've done.
Mhm.
And so people are asking about the current inflationary situation, right? So this particular person said, I got a job last year,
Mhm.
and now with this inflation, can I
Mhm.
renegotiate my salary? I've also had it with, I'm looking for a job, and should I have an expectation that, it's going to be higher salaries because of the inflation? So talk
Mhm.
to us a little bit about how that plays into the negotiation.
Mhm.
Can you actually negotiate on that basis?
Absolutely. And excuse me, just decided to thunderstorm.
Oh,
So if you hear
oh
background noise.
my.
But great question. And I feel like this is something that we're all following as a nation. So I may not have a succinct answer for this question. However, my answer will be specific to JPMorgan Chase because I don't know how other organizations are doing it, but I know for JPMorgan Chase, we're always, even before inflation, making sure we're keeping a pulse on what is the market value for any given role. Because as tech continues to elevate, we follow those trends to say, okay, this is a particular skill set that we're starting to see the value within the market go up. So we need to readjust kind of how we're looking at salary there. Your other question around kind of, I'm already in this role, should I renegotiate my salary? You want to follow the process of your organization. So for instance, we typically are not going to see I'm talking firm wide here. We run January to January when it comes to our performance review process, right? So at the end of each year, any opportunity for promotion, increase in salary, that's where that process is housed at. So coming in 2 months after you've just received an increase at the end of the year saying, oh, I noticed inflation, so I'm demanding an extra 10K. I'm not sure how that conversation will go outside of our usual practice.
Mhm.
However, as a firm, we're doing an excellent job of any adjustments that we need to make, even if that's midstream, coming from the top down. We're making sure that that happens. So it's not in the remit of the actual employee or the candidate to have to do that science behind that. But us as a firm, we're making sure that we're staying on the cutting edge of that to make sure that we're being fair and equitable across the firm. So again, speaking from the vantage point of JPMorgan Chase and how we look at that whole inflationary process or situation that's going on right now that we're all feeling, I can say based on my conversations with my partners and things like that, that is something that we're definitely keeping a pulse on and how we address it, whether that's people coming in or our current population. And then someone asked a question around a new offer that they're getting. Should they address that inflationary? I would say when you come to the table with your comp expectations, you should have that in mind as
Built
well,
in,
right?
right?
Instead of saying employer, answer this equation for me, because at that point in time, you don't know what their comp structure is. You're still learning these things. So coming in with that inflation in mind should be definitely a key point as you're determining what your comp expectations are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, and I just know from my own personal experience, right? It would be probably hard to expect, or you probably shouldn't expect, if inflation's running at 7.5%, that your company's going to give you 7.5%. And companies have to decide, right, how much they can do in the moment versus
Correct.
what the long-term expectations are. So
Yeah. Yeah,
it's reasonable to think, right, about
yeah,
an
there's
increase
no,
due to it, but yeah.
mhm. Yeah, there's no right or wrong answer at this time, because I think we're all feeling this. We're all in the same boat all at the same time. But I do know that it's something that the firm is not turning a blind eye to and just kind of like, we don't see that inflation over there. Like, no,
Right.
we definitely recognize it. We're always keeping a pulse on market value, just irrespective of any given role.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, good. So let's segue then and turn to Stephanie with some questions on the benefit side. So you've negotiated your job offer. It's coming, the job offer is coming to the table, and you're really excited to get started. There's a lot to think about, right, as you get started in a new job when it comes to benefits. So talk to us a little bit, Stephanie, about what are the various types of things that people should be thinking about. Let's start with maybe like a 401k. Let's start with 401k and talk a little bit about that.
Okay, perfect to have a target of starting with 401k, because there's so many different things. I can go in a lot of directions here, but yeah, when you do get that offer and you're reviewing benefits, you're generally speaking, depending on the size of the company, what the company has to offer, you should expect to receive, a comprehensive benefits package, which will include a lot of different things. We'll talk about healthcare benefits shortly, but 401k is a big one. Definitely recommend starting to invest in your 401k as soon as possible. If your company offers it, you should contribute. Biggest question and factor to consider there is, does your company match your 401k? If there is a match, you should contribute at least however much percentage your company is going to match for you. That is one thing that I specifically remember learning in my college finance class. My professor did the math and gave a full breakdown. So if your company matches 5% and you are only contributing 3%, then the company is only going to match the 3% that you're contributing. And at the end of the day, you're leaving free money on the table, essentially. So really, that's kind of my biggest piece of advice, is to contribute at least what your company is matching, if they do match. But that is always a great question to ask when you're reviewing benefits, looking into 401k. Does the company match? A lot of companies do, some more than others, but always a great thing to consider as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, whenever I've mentored people starting and getting new jobs, and so my advice has always been, put as much as you possibly can into that savings, because it just adds up over time. And especially, like you said, if you have a match, and some days you look back 5-10 years and you're like, wow, that's fantastic, I really actually saved a lot of money.
Yeah.
So what do you tell people about, like, going forward when they get a raise?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with this. It's hard. It's exciting when you get a raise or you get a promotion. You're like, oh yes, I'm getting more money in my paycheck. And that is awesome. But think about it. You were probably doing just fine off of whatever your paycheck was before. Not saying you need to put all of that difference into your 401k, but consider, maybe increasing it by a percentage or two. And that way the money is already being invested going into your retirement, and you don't even know it's gone when you do get that raise. So even though it is tough to think about that and to do, but if you can be diligent about doing that, it's really only going to help you in the long run. When you just don't even pay attention to that 401k, and then you look at it every now and then, you get that statement and you're like, wow, this money is really accumulating. That's really just going to help you down the road when you can retire quicker. So you'll thank yourself later. But yeah, if you do have the opportunity to add a little bit more when you do get raises, or if you go to a different company and you're making more money, it's only going to help you in the long run.
Right. Financial wellness. So speaking of which, going to a different company, we know that there are people on the call who have worked, in prior companies. Is there a process for, what do you do with that 401k that's from the old company?
Yeah, I actually did this myself when I came to JPMorgan Chase. And you may end up working just for one company and staying there till you retire. If you do, that's great. But a lot of people do end up moving around to different companies. And there is always a process for you to roll over your 401k. Typically will involve paperwork from your former company as well as the new company. Honestly, I was a little nervous about it when I first came over to JPMorgan Chase, and it was extremely easy. I just had a form from my previous employer to fill out, a form with JPMorgan Chase to fill out, and then the companies just did the transfer kind of on the back end. They just transferred the money over and it was easy for me. I do recommend taking care of that right away if you need to, just so that you don't forget about it. You also don't want to have multiple 401ks kind of left out there lingering with different companies. You want to keep your money together just so that you have tabs on it and know where it is at all times. So definitely keep that in mind if you are ever moving to a new company. It's exciting. There's a lot of transition going on, but don't forget about your investments and stay on top of those.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Yeah. So, okay, great. As you said, in your opening comments, there are a lot of different elements to the benefits package when you get a new job. So what about healthcare? Talk to us a little bit about the types of things. I mean, what can people expect? Should people be expecting, a healthcare package as part of their job offer? What are the things they should be considering? What should they be looking for, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. They should be expecting healthcare benefits. One thing I will say that Shaneqa kind of touched on is the healthcare benefits are really not negotiable. Those are pretty standard and set, from the company. So you should expect to see things like health insurance, like medical, dental, vision, life insurance. There's also a lot of different types of kind of additional benefits that companies can offer. An additional one is spending accounts. They have different spending accounts, like a healthcare flexible spending account that you may see. One big point around your benefits is just keep in mind of timing and deadlines. A lot of people just get really caught up in, starting their new job and they forget. Shaneqa might see this a little bit on her side in recruiting too. People miss their window to enroll, and it's not really an open, kind of free for all. There's a lot of time frame around that. So, be aware of that, know your time frame to enroll. Touching back on flexible spending accounts or healthcare spending accounts, that specific kind of account is regulated by the IRS. So a lot of companies do offer it, but the company itself usually doesn't kind of, manage the rules because it's managed by the IRS. For example, that account can be used for you to take money out of your paycheck before taxes and set it aside to use for any medical, dental, vision expenses, like, glasses, contacts. Maybe you have, dental procedures or things like that you need to have done. My biggest piece of advice for that would be, don't just jump to enrolling into that account unless you really do your research and it's going to benefit you. I have seen people kind of go rogue on benefits and just enroll into everything that's there just because they think they should. And then they actually end up losing money on it. So because the healthcare spending account is regulated by the IRS, you can't just keep the money forever. It has limits on, what you have to use or how much can roll over to the next year. And so I have seen people, elect into an account like that and then not end up having, the correct amount of eligible expenses and they lose money on that. So take your time with that. You're not expected to be an expert when you are reviewing these benefits. That's why, hopefully your company will have a benefits team or a health advocate or, someone that can just help you navigate that, just so that you're making the right decisions on your enrollment that's best for you. Everyone's personal situation is going to be completely different.
I remember at JPMorgan, there was a really useful tool that we had where it would help you to calculate how much you might want to put into that healthcare account. And it would prompt you to think about what are these types of medical expenses, dental expenses, vision expenses that you might have that aren't covered by insurance. And then you could figure out like, okay, it makes sense for me to put $1,000 or $2,000 into the account because that's what I really will use. And then you save, basically just saving the tax on that amount of money, which is nice. So perhaps the companies that people are looking at also offer those sorts of tools online that you can actually use to help calculate.
Absolutely. Definitely take advantage of the resources that the company that you're going to work for has to offer. A lot of them have online resources, online portal that can help you make decisions. I will say, if you are someone, maybe if you're going into a company and you already have insurance, whether let's say you're still on your parents' coverage or you have a spouse or partner that you're enrolled in their coverage, don't just automatically say, oh, I don't need coverage, I'm not going to look at it. Definitely take the time to look at it, because the coverage may be better with the company that you're going to, maybe cheaper, maybe more cost effective, maybe better coverage. So always explore your options and just do your research and see, what's out there.
Yeah, that makes total sense. What about life insurance, Stephanie? Especially some people coming right out of school, first job, right? They're presented with life insurance, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't know, like, I really don't want to think about that right now. I'm only
Right.
20 something years old. I don't. So
Exactly.
what do you usually suggest to people in terms of, do you purchase life insurance, or how does that work?
So a lot of companies that I have seen do offer basic life insurance, which does typically cover the employee at one times their annual salary, if God forbid something were to happen to them. But in addition to that, they do have what's called supplemental term life insurance, where you can elect an additional amount of money for yourself for life insurance. You can also elect usually for a spouse or domestic partner. So you can elect to have coverage on them if something were to happen to them, as well as children if you have eligible children. Yes, it's overwhelming to think about that, and no, it's not something anybody ever anticipates or wants to have to think about. The one thing I will say, the factors that go into the cost of health insurance, in addition to the amount of the life insurance, are going to be your age, as well as typically whether you're a tobacco user or not. So if you are younger, it really doesn't start to get expensive until probably like 50s, 60s, depending on, how many thousands of dollars worth of coverage you have. So if you are young, you don't have to go crazy getting a $5 million policy. And a lot of companies do have limits and restrictions on how much you can elect based on how much money you make. But if you do elect, even a $50,000 or $100,000 policy, it may cost you under $1 per paycheck or something like that. It's very, very, relatively cheap. So definitely something to consider. Other times throughout the year that you may be able to make a change to your benefits are if you ever have a life event. So if you get married, if you have a child, those are considered with most companies life events that allow you a window of time where you can make a change to your benefits. So we do see people that add, if they have a baby, they'll add life insurance on themselves because that's an additional factor to take into consideration. And then most companies also have an open enrollment or an annual enrollment timeframe each year, where you can kind of review and analyze your benefit options and make changes. So we do see a lot of people at that point, if they wanted to enroll in life insurance or increase their policy, they can do that during the open enrollment timeframe as well.
Yeah, that's good. So good advice to understand what the company offers versus what additional insurance you might need. I also remember at JPMorgan, and this may not be for every company, but something to think about is we had the wellness program that was really good. So if you got your wellness check, cholesterol, weight, things like that, you would get some savings on your health insurance if you were doing if you were relatively healthy. Just talk to everybody a little bit about looking for things like that type of a wellness program where it can bring down the cost of benefits for you.
Yes, JPMorgan Chase has a wonderful wellness program. There are so many different pieces of it that have helpful benefits. So one part does decrease the amount that you spend per paycheck on your premium. You also have the ability to earn money in an account, and you can use that money to help pay for your out-of-pocket expenses. And that money rolls over, and we have the ability to earn up to $1,000 a year. And so for me, that was really helpful. I had a baby 6 months ago, and I saved up money over the course of several years. So that really helped pay for those medical bills. Every company is different. So, every company company may not offer that same specific benefit, but if a company does offer any type of wellness program, take the time to figure out, what does that mean to you? What benefits come with that? Some, companies offer, teams and competitions where you can earn points and earn prizes. Or where you can earn money or earn funds to help you pay for things. So take advantage of that. It's kind of another aspect in a way sometimes of free money, or free benefits for you to do some things that can help save you money. But also a lot of the goals of these wellness programs are really to better yourself. Physical, mental, emotional wellness is very important. And that's what the company offers them for. So if you ever hear about that, don't just dismiss it or, not take a few minutes to look into it, because they're definitely there for a reason and can really offer some great benefits and definitely some financial savings as well.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, good. Thank you for that. And then I think you already mentioned, but just to drive this point home, generally speaking, you're not going to be able to negotiate the health plan or the life insurance and things like that. Is there any level of negotiation at all that happens around that? Can it contribute to a discussion of a higher salary if it's pretty expensive, for example, if the company doesn't subsidize? Are these the types of things you might be able to discuss as you're getting a job offer?
So, and I kind of want to loop in Shaneqa on this question too, if she doesn't mind. So yeah, from a perspective of the actual coverage, the cost, that is set by the company. So that's not negotiable. But what I would say is, let's say you're going from one company to the next and you're kind of doing a cost analysis. You can look at how much you're paying currently, and maybe the company that you're going to, the cost is higher for health coverage. It may be an opportunity for you when you are negotiating the salary to say, look, I am going to have to pay more for my health coverage than what I'm used to. I would like to ask for, X amount more in my salary to offset that. So I wanted to hear kind of also from Shaneqa's end, do you experience that, or do people bring that up in the negotiation process?
Absolutely. So I have people that I've hired from government official offices where there might be some taxes. They might have some special things around taxes, or they might have some special things around tuition reimbursement and things like that. Typically on things that we can match like for like insurance, we would still follow that same process to say health insurance is health insurance. But it does not hurt to ask, right, for any given role, to say, hey, this is what I need in order to maintain my lifestyle. So again, when you're coming to the table to think about your compensation expectations, and I think you can kind of hear this theme that here's all the things to consider as you're thinking about your compensation expectations. So definitely, Stephanie, get that benefits packet that you talked about in the very beginning, where it will break down some of the costs, the type of health insurance you can choose from. And if you do get that breakdown and you're like, well, wait, this is going to cost me a little bit more, as you're having those compensation expectation conversations, just make sure you're amending that number or being transparent as soon as possible in the process. Because typically once you get to the point of offer, value of seat is set. You've given your compensation expectations, so it may not be as palatable to come in and say, well, I need an extra 50,000, or if it's something astronomical, right? So you want to have that conversation as soon as possible.
Yeah, makes total sense. And actually, you mentioned something in that in your comments there that we didn't touch on, which is tuition reimbursement, something else just to think about and understand if a company offers that, because it can be quite valuable. If you, in your future, you're thinking, say, to go to grad school, if you haven't already done that, knowing that if there is some benefit to that out there with a company, that can be a lot of money and a lot of savings, and for somebody. So that's a real good one to think about. So I just want to remind everybody who's on the call that if you have any questions, to put them in the chat room, and because we're getting close to the end of our Q&A. I think we had one more question for Stephanie. Anything else people should think about in terms of, the onboarding process, setting themselves up to get paid and the like?
Yeah, so direct deposit, most companies offer direct deposit where you can put in your routing and account number for your bank so that you're paid automatically into your bank account. One thing just to make sure you're aware of, most of the time companies do have the ability for you to set up multiple accounts with the direct deposit. So let's say you have a savings account, or multiple accounts. You can set up to have a certain percentage or a dollar amount of every paycheck go into a specific account. So I have that set up where I have a certain amount that goes into a savings account, kind of like the 401k aspect. If you just do it and set it up, you don't really know it's missing. I know a lot of people say, well, I'll just, do the transfer into my own account. Trust me, it's a lot easier if it's just already set up that way. And that way, that money is already set aside. You can change that at any time. Again, let's say you get a raise. Oh, let me add $50 more, to setting up and have it distribute into the savings account. The only other thing I would just say too is when it comes to health benefits, it can be extremely intimidating to know and understand, like, what does it mean to talk about a deductible or an out-of-pocket maximum or specialists or primary care doctors. And the biggest thing just that I see on our end is just people really don't know. And it's not your job to know. You have a team of people, or at least a designated benefits person that's there to help you. So don't ever be afraid or embarrassed that, I don't know what this stuff means. That's okay. You're coming to a company, unless you're working on their benefits team, you're coming to the company to provide, your talents in another department. And so it's okay to ask those questions. So, it'd be better to find out and ask than, miss out on opportunities for enrolling in things.
Yeah, makes total sense. Okay, so we had one question come in. It's not exactly tied to the job offer, but I think it does touch on some things that we've talked about today. And this is someone asking about moving internally within the firm. So probably, Shaneqa, more for you. I think a lot of the things that you talked about today relate to moving even within a firm. And valuing yourself. So the question really is, if I don't have the experience, but I have the education to move to the new area, kind of how do I go about it? So maybe just briefly.
Yeah. You can shadow. You can reach out to individuals that work in that area, just to make sure that you can kind of get your footing. Make sure you understand that particular department, because if it's tech, every tech area is not created the same. You might be working on marketing in tech. You might be working on CCB in tech here. So there's different areas of tech. So you might want to actually sit down and shadow that specific department. Some areas like HR might be a little bit more sensitive, where that's not necessarily an option all the time to shadow at HR, just because of the sensitive information that we handle. But if you do have that at your fingertips, definitely look into that. I would say any specific certifications that you might need, but you said in your question that you have the education. So just find out from your specific organization any opportunity you might have to network, sit next to that person, really getting your feet wet in that particular organization, showing interest even before you get a role.
Yep.
And I just want to touch on that too. I think that's great advice. And it really just goes for speaking up, asking whether you're talking to your current manager, reach out, network. You really do have to be proactive about those things and put yourself out there. No one is just going to come to you and say, oh, hey, I know you have a degree in this, would you be interested in this? You have to kind of come out of your comfort zone a little bit with those things. But JPMorgan Chase specifically does have a mentor program. And I had one of my employees who she was working on our team in our benefit center, but she was going to school at the same time for like computer programming type of things. And she actually got enrolled in the mentor program, had a mentor. She's located here in Tampa, but her mentor was in Texas, and they met regularly. And once she graduated, there was a position open that she applied for, and she doubled her salary to go, going from where she was to this team, because she had that background, but she made those connections. She got to shadow. She worked on some special projects, with this team, and it just set her up for that next step. So take advantage of that, doing any kind of, shadowing that you can, and just network and meet people. That's the
got to
best
do the
thing.
work, right? You have
Yeah.
to do the work. You're not going to really often get tapped on the shoulder, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, good, great advice. So I think we're going to wrap up. and I'm just going to ask one last question that you can both just give a perspective on. We went through a lot of detail and a lot of specifics on benefits and negotiations and salary and valuing yourself. Let's all tie this back to financial wellness, right? So, reinforce for the audience today, how and why all these things that we talked about today are so important for your overall financial wellness. So either one of you, please just start a few comments and we'll wrap up.
Absolutely. I'll go first. I would say from a offer perspective, the reason why I love what I do, I started my career in social work, working with youth, working with adults. Like I've always kind of tag myself as like a people servant, right? And I feel like I found my sweet spot in recruiting because I really do believe that if you can impact someone's housing, education, employment, and I would also add in there healthcare, right? That's kind of the circle of well-being. So when you're coming into a new role, understand that is literally a part of your overall well-being, how you will be able to set the future of your family up, yourself up, and you deserve to be able to have those conversations around comp expectations and things like that. Don't be scared of that question. Like I really implore you to step into your worth and say, I'm worth having this conversation. I'm worth being able to put a dollar amount of where I want to be. And the worst thing they can say is that's way outside of scope, or fine, that sounds great to us. That's typically where our value of seat is, right? You don't know until you ask. I've seen some amazing things happen with some offers, right? Because I'm not the decision maker when it comes to the offer. I want to be clear about that, but I am a part of those initial conversations. I am the advocate that will step in and say, hey, let's consider this, or the candidate is looking for this, so let's consider this. I'm kind of that creative liaison between you and the business to really be vocal when you're not on those calls that I have to be a part of. So when you step to the table and say, here's my worth, let's have a conversation about that, right? Again, having that fluid conversation and coming at it as a conversation rather than people feeling like a negotiation is a strong army situation. It's not. Definitely step into your worth. Be okay with being vocal with that, because I've seen, like I said, some amazing things happen around people being vocal. To Stephanie's point, if your health insurance is going to increase, you won't know until you know. Speak up for yourself, and get those answers that you're looking for. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that will help you make a decision on this offer. You don't want to make a decision on an offer for a role that's going to impact your life with half of the information that you need.
Yep, that's perfect.
Sure.
Stephanie, couple comments?
Totally love and agree with everything that Shaneqa said, just kind of going off of that. The decisions that you make now are going to impact you 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. And, everybody works really hard their whole life to hopefully be able to enjoy retirement, do the things that you want to do. So you want to be able to enjoy all of it. Take advantage of opportunities, take advantage of your, financial situation. If you have the ability to save as much as you can down the road. And also from a career perspective, don't get too comfortable in a position. You want to keep challenging yourself. If you are in the same position for 10 years, you're going to be capped on your comp at some point and not have the ability to make more. You're not going to learn new things. You may be an expert at that job, but put yourself outside of your comfort zone, try something new, explore different opportunities, push yourself. You will end up surprising yourself as to what you can handle and what you can achieve and accomplish. So it's probably my biggest piece of advice.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's terrific. I love ending on that. So I'm going to just touch real quickly on a question that came into the chat, and it's about advice for succeeding in the workplace. So what I'm going to suggest is that folks should join our next session, which is going to be how to succeed as you enter, especially in the first job. What are some of the do's and don'ts that you should think about as you're in that position, and getting to know people and getting to know your new workplace and how that can lead to success in the future. So Lynn, thank you for the question, but why don't you join the next session? Because that's exactly what we're going to talk about.